Hello everyone, I'm Magick. Today I have with me Mark Allen Smith, and as you know, the first time I interviewed Mark was with the Scorpion God, which by the way was a very intense book of heavy gnosis. The second interview, of course, as you know, if you've been following all of the interviews of Primal Craft and Mark Allen Smith, was the Altar of Sacrifice, where we extended that interview, and it was a very well welcomed interview, where I extended it to asking Mark about the Primal Craft itself, as well as the Primal Craft occult publishing. Today, Mark has agreed to be here, and thank you, Mark, again.
My pleasure.
It's been over a year that I do remember you mentioning the Witchblood Grail, and it brought a lot of intrigue to me because of, first of all, you picked the greatest titles for your book.
Thank you. I don't actually pick them. They are delivered through gnosis in a form of what you would call very strong advice through the patrons and the gods, spirits and the familiars that I work with. I'm basically told this will be this book. The titles are very connected to the formation of the book and its purpose, which again they're also connected to its content, hence the Altar of Sacrifice being the introduction to the formation of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire through the ancient formula of the backward way of Hecate's witchcraft. And the Witchblood Grail is so named because it is basically the complete volume to the Altar of Sacrifice, as well as, due to the rites within it being a standalone volume, there are rituals within the Witchblood Grail that may be adapted by people through which they can attain self-empowerment and receive even more knowledge, hence the drinking of the blood of the goddess from the Witchblood Grail. There is also a series of gateways expanding to a greater gateway to the throne of the crowned Sabbath Prince of our witchcraft tradition that I will explain a little bit later. So the titles, as you've probably gathered, are not chosen at random. They're delivered, but these are the reasons behind it. They're very, very specific. So to be fair, I can't actually take credit for a lot of people mention that they're fantastic titles of the books that they're given to me. I've noticed that they inspire some other people out in the occult realms, and that's fine, but I don't actually choose them. They're given by Hecate, sometimes by Sephiroth or Belial or Lucifer.
I think I should actually pay attention and learn from experience of you telling me always that it comes from Hecate. It actually comes to you by gnosis.
It does, yeah. It's, I do almost all of the ritual work within the books. As you can see, there is some work that it's just not practical, and in the case of the Witchblood Grail, as I'm sure we'll discuss, there are one or two rituals that are just not practical in this aeon, nor morally ethical. They're brought forth as examples and an illumination of the actual raw, undiluted power of the primal witchcraft from the Atlantean aeon, and they're in the book at the I was going to say request, I would say insistence of Hecate as an illumination of the heritage and actual genuine history of the primal witchcraft in this way. But I am really but the vessel through which the gnosis comes through, the means through which she delivers it at this time. In a few decades it will be someone else who I am hoping will possibly be even more advanced than myself, the right student at the right time who will surpass what I'm doing. But this is all delivered by Hecate and Lucifer, Belial, Sephiroth, and the various other kin that they bring, the teachers, the guides, the spirits, the familiars. It doesn't come from me, it comes through me.
I see. Well, in this particular book, everyone, actually, you never cease to amaze me with the quality, and the gnosis is one thing which I've grown to really respect and Is there a reason behind the actual material that you actually put forth and you put forth each book?
Very much so. With the Primal Trilogy, for example, going back to the beginning, I used a form of silk, which anyone familiar with publishing and binding will recognise as kashgar. It's a very nice, it's quite a fine silk. Queen of Hell was shimmering green, and it is the green colour. Some people will recognise it as green being the colour of the devil or the devil's green fire. It's also the colour of the Supreme Mother, of her radiant sexual colours, and very much, in many cases, it is in iridescent green, her stellar colours, in which Hecate manifests. So Queen of Hell was bound in shimmering iridescent kashgar silk in green. The Red King is in royal blue, which is a colour very much linked to one of Lucifer's more prominent astral manifestations and an element of his stellar colours. And the Scorpion God has a far more earthy feel and look to it, not just in its binding and in its content, because it opens the gateways for the soul to the Atlantean realm. There's a lot more blood work in the Scorpion God. It's a descent through a mentor itself, through the sands of time, through the earth, and therefore it's still in a shimmering silk, but as you've seen, it's the brown colour. It's far more earthy, and it basically completely complements and suits that book. The Altar of Sacrifice is, to some people's eye and mind, a darker work, from the point of view that it is the introduction of the way of sacrifice and its formula in full, and within that, formation of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire, the means with which the adept, working alone or as a group temple or coven, may form, create, and with the correct formula of blood and sacrifice, open a temple through to the thrones of the gods, through the heavens, the hells, the Atlantean depths, and to the stellar heights. But because of the nature of the work and its initial introduction, it is a step into what some people would perceive as a darker realm. There's a lot of evening and a lot of night work, a lot of dark moon work. Therefore, the Altar of Sacrifice itself, where such an act will be performed, could be considered something that is a darker place, a darker stone altar. So black and the nature of the cover, it's almost like animal fur,
Yes.
which I believe speaks for itself in what we're saying when we bound that book. The Witchblood Grail, a different entity altogether. This is the Dragon Flame edition of the Witchblood Grail, and I basically wanted something that would show, it would give an idea of Dragon Flame, because in the formation of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire, you are connecting to the great beast of the earth, you're connecting to the behemoth, you're connecting to the great dragon, and with every drop of blood spilled, your own or sacrificial, if you work the sacrificial path, and I hasten to add that not everyone who walks in the primal craft is required nor wishes to perform the sacrificial arts, and I would like to reiterate the bloodless path is as noble before the eyes of the gods when beheld by them as the blood-soaked path. However, many people spill their own blood, people work in different ways. Every drop of blood spilled on this earth within the primal current enfleshes and remembers the body of the great beast, of the great dragon. Working within a temple of four pillars of fire, or any one of these vortexes where the formula is very similar, and has been, in the case of, for example, the Temple of Belial, I know it's something you want to discuss a bit later, where the gatekeeper of the Temple of Belial was given this knowledge direct by Belial. All blood spilled in this way enfleshes not only the body of the great beast, but also it helps form and reform and remember draconian entities, whereby each temple has its own temple dragon body. And the completion of that formula, it's initiated in the altar of sacrifice, but the formula itself is completed. The completion of such a temple, the opening of the gateways, ultimately to the devil's throne, is within this volume here. And it's within this volume that I wanted to put forth this knowledge, and I wanted to show the dragon flame, but I also wanted something that would show, almost akin to the manifestation of Belial in his more draconian and demonic aspects, the devil's flesh itself, in red, as he manifests from the inner planes to this plane. And then we've got this beautiful, it's a lighter coloured gold, a brighter coloured gold.
Yes.
And it reflects the knowledge, it reflects the transmutation of the soul and the knowledge of potable gold that is achieved through communion with the Witchflame Sabbath's Lord, the Crown Prince of the Sabbath, communion with the draconian entities, merging with Sephiron's venoms, ignited by Lucifer's fire, under the dominion and will of the Supreme Mother Hecate. And there was a lot of thought and a great deal of deliberation. But I believe, at least before the eyes of Hecate, this has been the perfect cover and the perfect binding. It's certainly been very well received by the people who have purchased and acquired the book.
Well, I have to say that each time again you step up. So
Thank you.
I'm very impressed to the point of you're gonna have to keep it up, because anything less than what you've done, and you've never done that, would be rather disappointing. And I know that you're not about to do that, so I can't wait till the next book. But we'll talk about that later. In this particular book, we're talking about 4 books, but we're talking about books that, to me, could have been individually put out, because there's so much information. And as I was reading the book, I thought to myself, if this book was out there, for the public to see on the regular shelf, it would be pretty dangerous, because there's a lot of valuable information in here, and something that it's not for the everyday reader, even the everyday occultist. You're talking about devotees and people who are very serious, not the people who are thinking about just your average grimoire of, rise to success or stardom. You're not talking about your average left-hand path. And no offense to many of those who are starting off or read such books. Everyone has to start off, to some degree. But these books require lots of dedication. It requires sacrifice in many form.
It does.
And it requires a lot of you. And there's a lot to actually, how should I put it? You're putting your soul on the front line with this book.
It's soul work. There's an old expression. You get out of something what you put into it.
Yes.
The Primal Craft path is not for the dabbler. However, many people out there are quickly discovering that there is, for want of a quick way of describing it, a lot of rubbish out there. There are a lot of dead ends. There is a lot of material written by people seeking simply to fill the gap within their own ego and write something in the meantime. Books entitled with God names, books reworking or rewriting, but reweaving together already rewritten ancient history, and a lot of repeated material. Basically, these books are the return of the primal current, as I've discussed in previous interviews. They're not for the dabbler. This book is a little bit different to perhaps even the Altar of Sacrifice and the other books. I think if I explain basically the position that I've been in with Hecate, when I was given this knowledge upon my own path and my own elevation, there were certain parameters that I had to follow. So I was very strict with people in my advice, and I remain that way. People that are working the Trident Trilogy, Queen of Hell, the Red King, and the Scorpion God. Those books must be worked sequentially. There are people that can come in from different levels of experience and find their own depth within perhaps Queen of Hell, but within the Trident Trilogy there are the 3 great crowns of divinity. Now they amass thousands of years of thousands, hundreds of lifetimes, thousands of years of soul evolution. It's the leaping path in evolution. Some people will open Queen of Hell, open certain gateways within or beyond the book's rites, and walk through and find a separate path solely for them, or be pulled through by one of the gods or one of the guides and go off on an entire, totally legitimate tangential path. Some people will acquire throughout this lifetime all 3 crowns of divinity. But those books, within those books, there are rites that you can take and that you can utilize, and then that you can evolve and even experiment with. And you can attain knowledge, you can attain power, there are techniques, there are rituals within them, but as a whole, the Trident Trilogy, the first trilogy, are a set path. Within that, it comes with caveat. Some people at the level of the soul may choose not to pursue the 3rd great crown of divinity. This is a huge commitment in the Atlantean depths, beyond the gate of Sephirans, beyond the abyss of the gods, to then stand eternally at Hecate's side. It is an entire evolution of the soul, many lifetimes, but some people may choose not to do that, or they may be guided by the gods of the path not to do that, and they may then undertake different roles in what could be classed as almost akin to ascended masters, returning to teach, to bring forth knowledge throughout different lifetimes, which is how this sort of work is actually returned at the correct time, and the correct time is chosen by the masters of the path, the supreme masters, those that created it, Hecate, Lucifer, Belial, Sephiroth, etc. So that's the Trident Trilogy. That's what they do, that's what those books are for. And when I released the Trident Trilogy, I have to be very specific. I was basically given a whole load of knowledge. I've done this a long time, before this lifetime, but even in this incarnation, I've been doing this for a long time, and I work at a very intense pace. Even throughout the military, I have always followed my studies. When there have been times when I've had to step back from it, that time has been more than made up for afterwards. Taking up the path, following the path, and pursuing my own evolution. But with the Trident Trilogy, I was told you must put this forward first. This work comes first. This is the path of evolution. Hecate wanted the 3 crowns of divinity, and the formula with which they may be attained returned without any ambiguity whatsoever. It's not a simple path, it requires ultimate devotion and hard work, but that had to be returned first. I work with the altar sacrifice, I work in the sacrificial arts, but I work in many, many aspects, and the Primal Craft is like the Mississippi River, and there are many currents and many strands and many streams within it. As the person Hecate has chosen to bring all of this back, I can only bring so much back at any one time. So the first parameter was the 3 great crowns of divinity. They must be returned first. The Trident Trilogy, therefore, was released first. After that, I was actually given a little bit more leeway and given a choice. The books of incarnation,
Yes.
the books of the way of sacrifice, and several other strands that for now shall remain nameless until they're actually released, because it isn't really relevant until they are released at that time. Once I have made an agreement with Hecate, then more knowledge in each individual path, aside from that which I've already worked, is given. And there then becomes a period of putting forth the knowledge I've given, and a very, very intense couple of years of working and pushing through the new knowledge is given. What I've been working towards with Hecate and Lucifer is to be able to give the individual who is both within the primal, both the individuals solely within the primal path, and those people who walk other paths and are outside the primal path, rites of empowerment, formula and knowledge with which they can empower themselves, they can attain abilities within the Witchflame Art that have been lost for centuries or perhaps even millennia. That comes down to what you would call basically pacts, arrangements with the gods. And I've been working with Hecate. Once the Trident Trilogy was released and it's been put out there to the general public that want it, I've been able to bring forth more material. The Witchblood Grail really is, it started a little bit with the altar sacrifice, but there's an awful lot of formula for the Temple of 4 Pillars of Fire. The Witchblood Grail is the start of being able to bring forward more formula, more power within the primal craft, but also to be able to give people rites and rituals of empowerment and gnosis that they can adapt. So people from other paths may take certain things from within this book. It's why I've described the book as obviously the essential companion to the altar of sacrifice, but also it is within itself a standalone tome. Example, the construction of the temple of the fetish lord and its ensoulment with the spirit of Belial. That is a part of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire, but that may be performed separately without constructing this temple. It may be performed in an indoor temple. It may be performed by someone who is a devotee of Belial, who is not actually of the primal craft path. The work of the incubus, again, dare I say myself, that is a very groundbreaking rite in that anyone who reads it and understands its power will see that for the last several hundred years we've only had a portion of that genuine formula and knowledge and that ability with which to transform our spiritual selves into an actual incubus or succubus form. That may be taken by anyone with sufficient knowledge and experience in whichever respective path that they're in, adapt it, or take it direct and utilized. I'm trying to get as much knowledge and as much energy and power and transformational formula and rites within the Witchflame art as a whole spectrum return to people as I can. And I'm certainly not restricted. I'm given an awful lot, but I'm sometimes given these things, allowed to put them forward with caveat. That normally, it's normally Hecate who holds all of the cards. Lucifer will have some pacts that he wishes to make with me along those lines, but Hecate is very, very precise in what she wants me to release, and if there are other formula and other rights that I wish to put forward, then she'd allow me to put a lot of things that I can return to people and put into the Witchblood Grail, provided that there are certain things that she wishes put forward that I've put in there. And we actually, it's done through a process of arrangement. As a consequence, as a result of that, consequently, the Witchblood Grail is not a book for the dabbler or the beginner. However, I have to say that there are a lot of people that purchase these books and they work with material. There are also a lot of people that purchase these books and they want the knowledge. They're not necessarily going to work it. Take the book and have the knowledge. The books are consecrated gateways. They will open up to you. I have people who work with these books and they don't actually perform the rites within them, but they travel through the books as consecrated talismanic gateways. They're consecrated as the body and flesh of the gods. The gateways are woven within. The consecrations are performed on each book individually, which is a painstaking process over almost 2 weeks for me that leaves me quite ill at the end of it because of the intense work and because of the intense possession. But gateways and actual spiritual familiars are woven within the book. So people take these books. What is very important is to get this knowledge returned. It's then up to the individual if they wish to decide to work it. Some people will open this book and think, I'm not ready for this yet. But if they have the knowledge and they have the book, then they have an energy center, they have a gateway, they have that power there. And they are able to attain the knowledge, even if it only gives them an understanding, a greater understanding of their own path, or they're able to adapt some of the work. Then it serves its purpose. Ultimately, I would like to see everyone who purchases the book working the material, but that's my role in devotion to the primal craft and returning and expanding the current. I would add that comes with caveat. I am a firm believer in quality, not quantity. I would rather have 10 devoted souls than 10,000 selfish, egotistical rock hoppers solely looking for power with no devotion to the patrons of the work. But with that said, I do have a desire to return as much independent knowledge. It comes through the primal arts, but if you can take it and you can adapt it, then by all means do so. So no, they're not beginners books, and a lot of the work in there it is powerful. But I think ultimately responsibility it rests with the custodian of
Yes,
the book.
indeed.
I know what people are going to ask me about this book. There are certain rites of sacrifice within the book. There are rites of human sacrifice within the book, and that brings us back to the initial pact and the arrangement that I formed with Hecate, wherein I was allowed to bring forward what I wanted.
Sure.
I wanted to bring forward the rites of the incubus. They're amazing rites. I wanted to put forward. There was never any doubt of, for instance, the Belial rite, the fetish lord rite, the formation of his body, both as the fetish lord and the fetish pole within the temple, within the cauldron womb of Hecate is the phallus, the devil's phallus, but within the womb of Hecate through which all work is seeded within the temple. There was never any doubt in that being brought forward. The Trident gods wanted that brought forward. It's not that they didn't want the incubus and succubus rites brought forward, it's that these are rituals that I've been able to put to lay forth for people that they can take and adapt, whether they are absolutely devoted to the primal craft path or not. They are extremely powerful and rich in knowledge, and I wanted to bring these forward. But in doing that, the arrangement that was put upon me was, you may bring this forward, you can put all of this knowledge forward. However, there are elements that you will put in this book. If you wish this to be the case, you will put, and so I had to make an arrangement with the Hecate. There are elements of sacrifice within that book that are extremely powerful, and even by primal craft standards in this aeon, unnecessary and immoral, but they are a part of the ancient heritage and an illumination, an illustration of the absolute unbridled power of the primal Atlantean era. I don't do disclaimers. I don't believe in disclaimers. It's written at the start of the book regarding the 2 rites of human sacrifice that are in there, that it should be obvious which rites in this time and aeon are to be performed and which are not. Ultimately, responsibility lies with the beholder.
Indeed.
And I wanted to preempt that before I get asked. It's very simple. If you look in the Old Testament and you read Abraham, if you go out and sacrifice a son for your particular god or deity, that responsibility lies with you. If you read the Quran and you take up arms that could be arguably unnecessary against people from other faiths, that responsibility lies in your interpretation, or at least your employment of the work within.
Indeed.
Those rights are there. Their power is unbridled. It is very real. Regarding the Eye of the Dark Queen, which is a sacrificial rite for people that haven't looked within the book, it's probably the most dangerous and most powerful. It's certainly the farthest reaching in terms of destruction ritual in any of the work I've brought forward. Will it work? Yes, it will. Have I tested it? No. Human sacrifice is not part of my own personal path. But it was requested, it was insisted, that that rite and the rite of the sacrificial priestess, which is an ancient ritual that I believe Hecate felt needed correcting. There are some descriptions of it in some books from the 70s and 80s that the goddess insisted were inaccurate. In short, the ritual of the sacrificial priestess is a means of passing on of power from the ancient Atlantean era, where the old priestess or the old priest approaching their death would allow themselves to be sacrificed. Their soul would go to the throne of Hecate, and their power would be passed on to their apprentice, who would then assume the power and in the sacrificial art be granted an entity, a guide, in the form of Hecate, but that wasn't Hecate, between a form of Hecate between herself and the priestess. It's almost a demigod entity. In the case of the sacrificial priestess, she would become one with this entity and it would elevate her to the level of demigoddess. But this is from the Atlantean era. It is the time of the Atlantean priesthood when this practice was commonplace. And it's no secret that in South America, in various ancient cultures, human sacrifice was practiced. Therefore, more men and dogs were sacrificed to Hecate at one time. And this is, even historically, even through written history, it's documented. It's there. Human sacrifice is a part of many ancient cultures. The goddess wanted it returned as an illumination and an illustration of actual rituals of power from the Atlantean era as a part of our ancient heritage and a part of ancient, genuine history of the primal witchflame arts, the primal witchcraft, the ancient Atlantean art of witchflame. So they've been returned for that, and that was a pact, an agreement that I made with the captain that allowed me to bring forth other material. The rites have been returned, described, and given as they were to be performed. They were given to me as though they could be performed. Therefore, I have not. It was impressed upon me I should not edit them, nor make them ambiguous, no obfuscation. Give them as though they were to be performed, and return them as an example of this power. Particularly in the age of over-control of civilizations, these rituals were employed in the Atlantean era for the Atlantean civilizations to defend themselves, to defend their borders, to overthrow tyranny. I'm not suggesting anyone practice them now. They've merely been brought forward as an example of historical power, in contrast to the over-controlling tyrannical governments that control the majority of this planet. That was Hecate's instruction, and that has been followed to the letter, literally.
Part of the reason why I resonate with the Primal Craft so well is because of the balance of what it gives to humanity and also to the practitioner.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the elements of healing. And there are rites in here that do give to the parts of healing. And through my talks with you offline, and I do believe you've mentioned before in one of the interviews that you've had quite a bit of a first-hand experience in bringing in the current and helping others through the, let's just say, the crossroads of life and death.
Yes, I have. Well, it's true what you say. At face value, looking at the books, and particularly, I would say particularly listening to me in interview, discussing the last couple of chapters, it does at a glance look all dark and all malefic. As you know, and I would like other people looking at the books know, that is not the case. The work is primal. It is primal because it comes from a primal aeon. It comes through the Atlantean aeon, which in the application of the work in realms of sacrifice initially and things like that was very primal, but it was also very, very sophisticated. There is a metaphysical science to this, to the reformation, to the healing or the destruction of subtle bodies and soul forms through which our bodies of flesh are empowered. The ability to manifest upon this plane is initiated on the subtle planes. As most people who have a basic grasp of magic will understand. But it has been conveyed by some people that the primal craft work does look at first glance very dark. It is not all blood, fire and brimstone. Initially, I would always say to people, you will find what you go looking for. I've seen people come to this work, and I've seen really brilliant people, really good people perform really well. There is a balance. Within every soul, there is a male and female aspect. There is an aspect of light and darkness. The plants outside do not grow without both light and dark. They feed through photosynthesis in the light. They grow when the sun goes down in the dark. there is a balance to everything. Queen of Hell, it's far more blatantly obvious in Queen of Hell between the work with Lucifer and Hecate and the Archon Michael. There are certain rituals that actually they recalibrate and rebalance and greatly empower the soul to an equal degree of light and darkness on either side, the soul and the male and the female. In the other work, because the rites are very powerful, there is quite a lot of blood work and a lot of sacrifice work. It's easy to see it, it's, I suppose in some people's eyes, evil. Some people they do perceive it in that way, and the work is, there is a lot of blood and a lot of fire in the work. When I first started getting really heavy malefic rites, I questioned why. I mean, I'm quite an aggressive person. I'm a former parachute regiment soldier. It's intrinsic to my personality to be aggressive. I'm certainly not Buddha, that's for sure. I have my own personality, and despite being the channel through which Hecate brings this and her scribe, you know, I don't walk around in a permanent state of Zen calm. However, even by my standards of aggression, the Malefica is extreme. And one of my first questions with certain rites was why do I need to know how to bind a soul to a rotting human carcass? The Scorpion God, for those of you that haven't read it, contains that rite in the small malefic section in there. And it's very simple. There's more than one answer to it. I would like to say that the occult community as a whole is fantastic, and everyone works together. And I naively, many years ago, actually had I suppose it would be classed as rather childish dream of everyone working to one purpose. And alas, it's been my experience that that is not the case. The old axioms of to know, you know, to dare, to will, to keep silent is the one that I want to get to, because it causes jealousy. Yes. However, if you're putting forth the work of your gods, you can't keep silent. But it does cause jealousy, and I have personally been on the receiving end of some of that. Therefore, in short, you need to know how to look after yourself, not just on the physical plane. Spirits, jealous spirits, I'd have not suffered at their hands, but I have seen and felt in the past, now no one gets to now, but in the past I've learned by experience that human beings can be less than evolved, no matter how much experience they have or how much ritual gnosis they have acquired. So that will be on a very basic level. But at a more sensible and advanced level, regarding extreme malefica, if you know how to do something, you know how to undo it. And while it seems to have simmered down now, there was a period a couple of years ago where people who were in terrible states, due to malefica at the hands of other people, were writing to me. And these weren't just people who were unbalanced and thought that everything that happened to them was an attack. You know, one of my skills is I'm not just a practitioner of Witchflame, I'm actually a medium. And I can read people, I can read them through their emails, I can read, I can feel, and I can see things. And you could see that some of these people some of it was African tribal religion, and there were people in the West Indies who had problems. They were helped. I basically give them the applications, that I give them the knowledge with which to help themselves. I can stop something like that, but it doesn't stop it happening again. If you are the victim of something and you stop it, then that individual can no longer come back, provided that you do it correctly. If you know how to do these things, you know how to undo them. And with that, within that whole path of Malefica, you don't just learn how to undo these things, you learn how to heal the damaged subtle bodies, the damaged soul forms, and ultimately, the very end process is that you heal the body and you heal the mind, because emotional wounds are not finite, and Malefica can cause huge emotional damage as well as spiritual and physical damage. It's all intrinsic, it's all interlinked, as basically everyone listening will understand. But further to that, there are pathways within the Primal Craft through which extreme healing can be achieved. excuse me, and I do have first-hand experience with this. It goes back, almost a decade and a half, and the first rites are within Queen of Hell. Initially, they're on a spiritual level, where I had someone very close to me who was a suicide, and the soul couldn't move on. So I've covered this. I don't want to get into too much detail. It's an extremely personal aspect, but anyone with half a bat's ear of intuition who reads Queen of Hell under the section of love and loss will be able to intuit. There's a couple of lines, and it says, "I call to the heart of the shadow you cast, for thou art so much more than the shadow of my heart." That isn't just written to Hecate. That was written to an individual who took her own life and who was then unable to move on. At that time, I was unable to help her. I wasn't even in the same country, and I wasn't able to stop her. I felt her go. I was driving a car when she went, and it almost caused an accident for me. Such was the violent death. She took an overdose, for anyone that's curious, but that isn't the case. Sometimes they're just slipping under, the heart stops, people choke on their own stomach contents. It can be actually a horrible and violent death, and I experienced that. Because of our emotional connection, this person wasn't able to move on, and so it was with Hecate's assistance that I brought her spirit into a willing participant in sexual communion. Because the sexual union is more than just physical in many cases. It's emotional, it's spiritual, it's mental, and there is a universal formula in the communion that allows you to unite as male and female, as lunar and solar, just one last time. And that can put to rest so many things and allow the soul to move on. So that was a very good experience in that way. I had a far more physical experience. I participate in certain motorsports. It's my guilty mundane pleasure. I do have those as well. I work so intensely that I need something that prevents my sanity and basically from me crossing over completely and remaining within the realm of the spirits and the gods. I need some things that ground me, and that's one of them. I have in the past always kept this very private, but I'm not afraid or ashamed to live my life in the open. I don't mind people knowing that I participate in certain competitive motorsports. In short, I received intuition within the team that I work. It's quite an extreme motorsport. That one of our group was going to be killed, was going to die. I was told it was a younger man, and I was told it was within 6 weeks. And as one member of the group asked me in a late day, "Why didn't you say something?" Well, I'm the only one of my kind in that group, and they don't know much about me, but they know I have certain abilities or gifts. Psychics are not always appreciated, as you know, and if I had said anything beforehand, I couldn't be specific as to what road, what curve, then inevitably if something happened, I would have been blamed for jinxing the group. I mean,
Right.
this power in the hands of the gods within certain aspects is limitless, but my talents are not. I am still bound by laws of flesh and blood, and I didn't know whether it was going to be a friend Raoul or a friend Danny. They were the only two younger men in the group. It did happen. It was within 4 weeks. Let's just say I came around the corner and saw the devastation of a young man in his mid-20s with a helmet smashed. He'd basically hit a road barrier, full face, at a high speed. His vehicle looked like it had met with its own apocalyptic end. It was unrecognisable. And the people around him, surprisingly enough, were not particularly skilled in first aid. It's been a long time since I've had to apply first aid in real time when there's been blood all over any kind of scenario or anything like that, and I was actually struggling to remember everything that I was taught in the military, as well as trying to remember my Spanish, because this gentleman doesn't speak a word of English. And I put my hands on him, and I could feel he was trapped. In short, all of his skull and all of his face were shattered from the impact. On the front, at the back he was fine, and from the neck down, we found out later, there was nothing but severe bruising and a lot of blood pouring into his lungs. It was on intuition and intuition alone that I initially took a very big risk, and it was I needed to take his helmet off when they say you should never do that. And a friend of mine said, I need to take this off, and a friend said, you don't take the helmet off. And I had my hands on this guy, and I could feel an element of something very bad happening. And he was swallowing his tongue, and he was swallowing, his lungs were filled with blood. And the first thing I needed was to remove a blockage, and I said, look, if I don't remove the helmet, it isn't going to make any difference. He's going to die anyways. And he doesn't understand a word of English, so just because even in comatose states people can hear. So, for 25 minutes, I administered what first aid I could until the paramedics arrived. When they left, it took them another half an hour at the roadside before they moved, and that's when you know it's very serious, because they're not going to move him until they can stabilise him, and they'll fight and stabilise this guy. Cutting a long story short, the doctor at the hospital said, well, he needs his entire face and head reconstructed, and that's the small job. Let's see if he survives the next 24 hours, because he has brain damage to the left side of his brain, and I really don't think that we're going to reach the reconstructive phase at all. He basically said the man was going to die in the next 24 hours. I went home covered in my colleague's blood. It's not the first time I've done that, but it's the first time I've done that in recent years outside of a military uniform, and I've been outside of that for quite a long time. So the guy's a personal friend. Everyone's sort of in this mess. It happens, accidents happen every day. This is when you find out what your witchcraft skills and your connection to the gods are actually made of. These tests come along. I'm not suggesting that Hecate allowed this. She told me it was going to happen. She also told me the guy was going to die. I could pretty much feel that. I had to spend quite a few hours of that day later. Once I was wearing a scarf. I gave him first aid with a scarf. That was soaked in blood. The rest of it had to come off me, and it was raining that day, so I went out in the rain, and I just spent the rest of the day out in the rain, soaking my body and getting everything out, because I had this chap's emotional shock in my subtle bodies, in my energy centres, and in my systems. He went into a coma from the impact, and his feeling of being trapped, his emotional shock, his need to, his brain was trying to move his body when I was giving him first aid, because he was dry land drowning, so we were having to support his C-spine and move him. It was very physical. There wasn't much witchcraft other than the energy and the natural healing ability that I have, and that hits a wall when you've got broken skull and face, and it pervades through that wall, but you can't instantly fix that. That's not something that you can do there and then at a roadside. Those elements, facial reconstruction, I'm not that talented. I'm not a neurosurgeon. You actually need, you need an element of modern medicine. But what concerned me was the fact that the doctor had confirmed that this was it. These were his last hours. So I've never been afraid to fail. I figured, what do I have to lose? So I went to Hecate's altar and I made a ritual. I opened up connection. I opened myself up and gave myself over. I needed the healing. I needed Danny's emotional shock out of my system. I needed to speak to Hecate. I have never had a reason to doubt anything the Queen of Hell has said, ever. She's never been wrong in anything she's said to me. She's never been inaccurate in anything she's conveyed. Therefore my words were, I understand he's going to die. He's not, as far as I know, one of your children, and I understand that, circa 7 billion people on this planet, people die every day. Look, we're built to die. We're built fragile for a reason. We're not built to last forever in the flesh. That's why we have different incarnations. However, what is the point of having all of this knowledge if you only live in a fantasy bubble, and I don't? What is the point of having this ability if you cannot make a difference to at least the life of someone who you're connected to? I don't have the power of life in that way, so I asked Hecate. I said, I realise this is not perhaps top of your list of things to get done. This wasn't the terminology I used, but in essence, this is what I said. And I realised that he probably doesn't matter to you, but he matters to me. So if you can't or you won't do this for you, I'm asking you to do this for me. I made a very emotional plea to Hecate. My connection to Hecate is stronger and more powerful than my connection to any other form, living or dead, or spiritual or flesh, or in any way, body to fire, body to, it doesn't matter. So that's what I asked her to do. And she told me to take his blood, my bloodied scarf soaked in his blood, and place it upon her altar, and to make prayer morning and night for the reinstatement of his health, for his rapid recovery, bearing in mind that the doctor had said that the left side of his brain was damaged, without hesitation, without doubt, and in absolute faith unto her. And her words were, when he walks out of that hospital on his own two legs, and he will walk out of that hospital on his own two legs, then you will then on that day and no later take that item of your clothing and wash every last drop of your friend's blood out of it, put the matter behind you, and walk forward with your own life. You will see him again. The gentleman is back in the motorsport industry. There is no brain damage. He walked out of the hospital on his own. I lost a few kilos of weight because obviously I am required to participate with my own energy. I didn't do that. She did that. I didn't bring him out of that hospital. She did that. But I was a participant to this, and I'm not a big guy anyways. I kind of look rather drawn and gaunt. I probably lost, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 kilos, but that shows quite easily on me. He was out very, very quickly. The doctors had to reconstruct his face. They made a very good job. I showed you the photographs of this gentleman. And it's my understanding that when he went back onto the same mountain pass, that he had a few flashbacks to the accident. That's natural. He's gone through those. It's also, I know that he has some stiffness down his left side, and his reflexes are not quite what they were. However, with that said, when I compete, I'm extremely aggressive. I'm actually quite good at this. I'm really fast. Never been in front of this guy before or after the accident. He has returned to his. It's more of a hobby for the guy than anything else. He used to do it semi-professionally. And I only ever see the back end of his vehicle taking off into the distance. So that's one example. There is another that I was not quite so connected to. Excuse me. Recently, and I'm not going to go into detail because it's very private to the person concerned. There is a devotee of Hecate. He's one of her children. He walks this path, gets himself into trouble every now and then, but he knows that, he freely admits it, but he keeps coming back to Hecate. And the guy shows, in devotion, he shows a lot of promise. I get periodic, infrequent email connection from the chap, and he's, if nothing else, he's always cheerful, no matter what happens in his life. So when I got an email a couple of weeks ago that his sister had some form of altercation, accident, or done something silly, and that she was in a coma, he asked me directly, do you have any rites that can bring someone out of a coma? Now, the first thing is that people need to understand that there isn't an element of, I won't say destiny, but there is an element of sometimes we're meant to leave. When it's my time, whether it's decrepit and old age, in a bed with a pen in my hand, still writing Hecate's knowledge, or over the end of a cliff in some really aggressive motor sport, whatever, then that's Hecate's decision. I hate to disappoint some members of the occult community, but I dare say I'm probably going to be very old. But we are built to die. We're built for that, and there's an element of the soul has its own path, and sometimes things can be altered for a soul. Otherwise, you wouldn't have malefica were that not the case, and a body of flesh. But again, I always come back to what is the point of having this knowledge and these abilities and this power if you can't help someone or you can't do something about it? It is not guaranteed that it is going to be successful every time. Sometimes the hands of the chess's cloth on the throat will say, no, fate is this way, and Hecate has decreed that it is this way, or Lucifer, or whichever path you're on, then what will be in that way. If you love someone and you're going to lose them, should you attempt to fight, why not? Why go quietly into the night? You know, I won't. If it's Hecate's will, then yes. Am I going to go quietly? I didn't come into this world quietly. I was apparently kicking and screaming. I'll probably leave the same way. So I believe that you should employ your will, and if you have the knowledge and the power to do that, then do so. If you can help someone, then help them. As regarding rituals and ability to bring someone back from what is essentially being trapped between the worlds, which is where a coma leaves you, yes, they do exist. My reply was, in the wrong hands, they'll do more harm than good. However, if you have ultimate faith or are willing to commit yourself to ultimate faith, if you're willing to give it a go, and you, obviously this was a family member, it was a sister, and you have the love, and you're willing to spill some of your own blood and work tirelessly day and night until the end result is achieved in Hecate's name, then you can do this. So I gave some very basic instruction as to what to do. Sometimes things don't need to be, soul evolution can be very complicated when you're opening gateways that haven't been open for 20,000 years. But when it's just healing that requires extreme power, the goddess of witchcraft has extreme power. If you have access and connection to her, and she regards you as someone who is one of her children, or maybe will give her that devotion, it's not going to hurt you to ask. It's not going to hurt you to come across and try it. Rather than stand there and do nothing and feel helpless, give it everything you've got. If you've got some love and compassion in your heart, then employ it, especially for someone that you obviously genuinely love. And that's what this chap did. It was a short while later, because I asked him, and I will go this far, and after that it's private, I intuited, I just wrote, is it drugs? Because that's what I felt it was, and he said, yes it is, and I thought, okay, I thought so. I got a lot of information about it from Hecate later. I did a ritual myself that night. It took me to the edge of emotion, to the edge of tears, because I'm picking up family emotions. I'm opening myself up to everybody else's emotional tidal waves. That's natural. You need to be able to do that to heal in this way. It wasn't me that did it. It was the guy who emailed me and his connection to Hecate. I was just trying to assist with the energy that I have. It's my understanding that the sister is out of a coma. Let's hope that she cherishes every day that she has now, because it is by the grace of her brother and his connection to the Witchflame goddess that she's back, and back that quickly. So that gives an indication of very first-hand direct experience with this. Well, will that be the case every time? I'm not Hecate. I don't have that decision. But I put it to you. If you walk this path, if you're connected to this, if you walk your own path, you have your own patron deities, then use your energy, use your power. If there's someone there that you can help them, you can heal them, you can save their life, why not? So no, the Primal Craft has an awful lot of intense power, and it is primal. It is, it's named that for a reason. Its current is very primal. But is it all about destruction? Absolutely not. You need sometimes to spill blood. There's a lot of blood work in it. It's about empowerment. It's about soul evolution. It's about protection, your foundation, yourself, your family, your loved ones. It's about healing. And just sometimes, every now and then, if people will not desist, then yeah, you need to harm people. You need to damage them. If someone's going to keep coming and encroaching where they shouldn't, and I'm being polite, if they're trying to attack you and hurt you or hurt your family, look, this is not a turn the other cheek type of
definitely.
environment, and I'm not that person. There are perhaps people within the primal current that are that way inclined, and I feel at a stage now where my aura is so dense that I have so much protection, quite possibly because I'm doing the work, it doesn't matter. Therefore, I feel, at least now, that I bring forward the gnosis of a malefica and things like that, but I don't feel that I really need to indulge it. Occasionally you have to tie someone up so that they have to, that they behave, and then they can go on and learn a lesson and hopefully mature a little bit and go and evolve, or not, on their own path. But these have been interesting experiences for me, because they're not just at a spiritual level. The power operates at a spiritual level, but it flows through everything. So when you're covered in the blood of someone you really care about, who is a close friend, or when you're sat at or a family member is sat at the hospital bedside of someone who's in a coma, then you find out it's called putting your money where your mouth is. And like I say, the hands of fate move at a higher level than the minds and hearts of men and women. But if you have this connection, why not use it?
Indeed.
But you have nothing to lose. There are other aspects within the book of healing, but where healing and malefic are intrinsically intertwined.
Yes.
If you wish to discuss those, then we can bring them.
Well, I thought it was important for everyone to know this, because clearly the power is a huge, because it covers a huge territory. It covers every territory. It's
Yes.
not just within malefic, means of destruction and getting back at someone or binding someone. I just thought that was very important. But
the power is all-encompassing in every aspect of our existence and our soul's existence, from before and far beyond this particular incarnation. For those that walk in the primal path, you're following the current back to Hecate's throne. You bathe in the primal current. Therefore, it runs through, it affects, it can affect, and it is a part of every aspect of your life, of your soul, of your persona, of your evolution.
Mark, that's spectacular about everything that you've mentioned, to your friend on the road, to especially this last incident, because it's so close, because as I know, everyone grows spiritually, everyone's relationship increases, and I'm quite sure with you, and the powers that be, Hecate and Co, it's been a growing process. And with healing then, can you tell me a little bit about how someone would possibly go about using this book?
Okay, there are the examples that I gave regarding the accidents and the incidents were to demonstrate the possibilities within the path for people who attain that connection, or who are willing to give that devotion. And as I said, the hands of fate, ultimately, as controlled by Hecate, they have the last word on this. But if you've got that connection, if you've got that power, you have nothing to lose. But what you're asking me essentially is, are there specific rites of healing within the actual book?
Indeed.
Yes, there are. For example, using the, as opposed to just raw connection to the current and pure faith, love and devotion, there is primal formula, there are rituals within the book itself. The first one that springs to mind is one of the rites of Muman's flesh. Now this is a rite akin, I think some people would, it's very primal, it's an old ritual, again being returned within this current, that it is akin to some, I don't know, I'm not a practitioner of African tribal religion, but I think people would find something akin to it in there. And it is work, it's sacrificial work with snakes, with serpents, and it is work with the primal Atlantean god Muman, the serpentine god. And this involves healing people from physical ailments to physical illnesses
right up to entity possession. It is, alas, it is sacrificial work. The formula is quite specific and it's quite in depth, but suffice to say, you're working in possession with Muman. Now, he's very powerful. He's someone that you need to build a relationship with. I would go so far as to say you need to. Muman he's fantastic to work with. He has immense power, but he needs to be approached with caution. If I were to say you need to approach Muman through Sephirans, it gives people an indication of how the possibilities of how dangerous work with him could be. There is the possibility for people to lose themselves within this work due to the elements of power in the realms of corruption, and again it brings us back to Malefica. But that can be very much an element of what is intrinsic to the individual's personality, their heart, their soul. If someone is that way inclined, then they're going to fall quicker. If someone is approaching the knowledge and the power for the right reasons, or at least in genuine heartfelt reasons, in genuine devotion, in genuine evolution, there is nothing wrong with the quest for power and for more knowledge. It's like anything. It brings us back to light and dark. It's about balance. And that includes balancing yourself. So regarding working with Muman, there are rituals wherein you can employ the use of a living serpent, and you can use the serpent and the entities and the familiars that Muman brings to draw illness out of a body, a person's body, an animal's body, into the body of a serpent that is to be sacrificed, or a serpent, a body that has been sacrificed. There is more than one rite within the chapter of Muman's flesh, and within that there are tangential paths off that are explained quite specifically as to how to perform this art. There's nothing ambiguous in there. The formula has been put forward through which people may actually draw illness out of a body. It's sacrificial work, it's bloody and primal work, but then again, not everything can be done through the employment of energy, through radiating soul energy through someone. Sometimes you actually have to work, as above, so below, and that can involve, certainly within this path, sacrifice. The ability to draw out a powerful entity and bind it within the body of a sacrificed serpent also exists. With Muman's power, you may then also bind that entity, and using his force, bind it to your will. You can either bind it and seal it, or you can bind it and you can force it to work for you. So malefic entities that are sent through curses, or that find access to a human body and soul, perhaps through misguided occult practices of said individual, and they end up possessed. It does happen. It can happen. Not everything is benign out there, as I think as most people have realised. And sometimes, if you're working with an occultist, for example, and they are quite an experienced, or let's just say maybe not a well-travelled occultist, then the Catholic rites of exorcism, they're not likely to bring you that much success. I mean, you can use them, you can use a lot of force, you can use a lot of force of will, but if they are long departed from that path, and they are a well-travelled occultist, and they have made mistakes, gone through the wrong gateways, been led through the wrong gateways by people who have self-proclaimed masters of witchcraft and magic, and there are a lot of them about, giving, inaccurate gnosis, be it pathways in their own head that they've put forward that are dead ends. Entities can find their ways in through that, or inaccurate pathways through actual genuine work, but they're not as accomplished as they claim to be, or that they believe they are. The delusion is a problem within the occult. Then someone can end up with a form of malefic possession. And now when I say malefic possession, I don't mean, in this instance, delivered by a curse. Right. I mean malefic possession as in the entity, its intentions are malefic towards the individual. It's after self-destruction, it's after humiliation, self-violation, violation of animals, people, property, and ultimately it's after claiming what lies within the flesh. or using it and burning it up until there's nothing salvageable left. If someone has not initially embarked in this incarnation or in recent incarnations, therefore they are what I would consider not connected to or departed from. I'm not picking on the Catholic Church per se, but I'm using them because their rites of exorcism are perhaps the most prominent. You could go into Jewish mythology and find rites of exorcism there. If these people are departed from that path and well-travelled occultists, or they have never been, even as souls of this path, those rites of exorcism are going to struggle. I'm not saying that they will fail, because there is power in these other areas, but they're going to struggle and they may fail. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and in that case, Muman is a primal Atlantean god. His servitors are primal Atlantean. They antedate all of these paths. Looking at the Old Testament, it's been taken from Sumeria, Babylonia. You're going to work with a god, with Muman, who antedates all of that. He's Atlantean. You're talking about, if you don't like the term Atlantean, then the first era of powerful, civilized, spiritual force before the formation of the abyss in the soul path of man. Because sometimes the word Atlantean, it's validated enough. People don't like it. It throws them off. I think it makes some people think of crystals and dolphins and things, and actually it's anything but. Within the book, to discuss further, there is a rite known as the Devil's Flesh, and it is a creation of a portion of the flesh of the Crown Prince of the Sabbath. The rite itself is actually pretty horrific. It's a rite of sacrifice without the honour and the last rites of sacrifice. It is necessary in that way. It's almost antimonial within the path of sacrifice, because it doesn't give the honour of the soul being elevated to the throne of Hecate. It does anything but. Initially, it is it's an awful practice, and it's a very violent and black rite, and that's where it draws its power from, and the sacrificial flesh taken from that initial killing. Because I can't call it a sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice. The rites are not given. It's a killing. The flesh taken from that is marked with glyphs in this book, glyphs that are formed from the body of the Crown Prince of the Witchflame Sabbath. They're formed and given directly by Belial. They're from his flesh. It forms a portion of his flesh, and it draws in a powerful entity from his realm. That flesh then becomes the entity's footprint upon this plane. One of the more beautiful aspects, or perhaps the saving grace might not be the best expression, but for want of a better expression, of this awful rite, is that in its initial formation, in its initial construction, what this ritual does is it opens a gateway, it opens a vortex, and it releases the trapped souls of all those, and it's within the area, and the area, I can't measure it. The area is designated by the spirits of the place. The ancient spirits of the place bring forward all they who walk in limbo. So in the area of Spain, you're talking about the people that were raped, murdered, had family members taken within the Spanish Civil War in the times between. It's relevant to that actual geographical location, but in my personal experience, that is what I experienced. They come through the devil's flesh. They come through you. All the babies that were killed, all of the people that were executed, and you're going to see all of them. You're going to feel, and it's very overwhelming because you feel their emotion. But the devil's flesh is empowered. It becomes this titan, this piece of flesh of power, because it takes all of that horrific, black, malefic energy, all of that hatred, all of that sadness, all of that violation out of these souls as they pass through you and through it. It becomes a veritable box of nightmares. It takes all of that out of them. It opens the gateway, and it allows them, these trapped souls, people, entities, beings that are trapped between the planes, that walk the earth in spirit form, who can't move on, and it allows them to move on. And that in itself is it's a very special thing to be able to do for souls that when, especially when you experience their emotion, but it can be, to undergo initially, it can be quite horrific, but it's the hand of Belial and it's the actual amulet of the devil's flesh itself that allows you to feel that, but prevents you from suffering at the hands. All of that black energy goes into the devil's flesh, and it becomes the entity that then holds it. It feeds upon that. With every action or interaction with the devil's flesh, this being, it's bound to your will by Belial, this being grows in power. It's not a thought form that was created. It's an ancient elemental that is released specific to your rite of the creation of this amulet. Now, like most things within the Primal Craft, it's double-edged. You see, what you can take out, you can put in. The devil's flesh can be used to heal people. It can take sickness out. The more illness, the more spiritual pain, the more physical illness and sickness it draws into itself, the stronger it becomes. It has a malefic application for those that would find that interesting or would need to really intensely defend themselves. What it's taken out can be put back into separate parties, the flesh, the subtle bodies, the soul. It's quite horrific, it's quite awful, but it's a fact of Witchflame and Malefica. That can be done. In doing that, it then becomes even stronger. It doesn't deplete when it puts it, because it then feeds off the malefic effect on the cursed person, on the hexed person, on their negativity, and attaches itself to them and becomes even stronger still, and continues to feed them while it pours this. I mean, it's the type of cursing element that can put an end to an incarnation. It's actually very difficult to kill people with Malefica, despite what many people claim. It normally takes sustained attack, and the effects, for anyone who's ever seen it, I'm sure they will agree, of seeing somebody's flesh, knowing that that has been initiated by a curse, over a period of months liquefy to something like cancer. There's no glory in that, there's no pride in that. When you're dealing with someone like a pedophile or something like that, it's a case of really, I think, if you wish to follow that path, approach it like you would in the military. If you need to use a firearm, use it. Don't revel in it, and employ it. The morals of taking that law into your own hands, that's not my debate. If you're looking to do that and you're looking in the Malefica, that's your path, that's your test. You're doing it for the right reasons, you will not fall. You're doing it for the wrong reasons and flexing muscle, I think everyone knows what's going to happen ultimately at the end of that. These are all intrinsically woven with their own tests, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be used. Coming back to the devil's flesh, one of the other things that you can do with it is a very, very powerful exorcism tool. The entity, the elemental that exists within the devil's flesh, that is the devil's flesh, is connected directly to Belial. It has his power when requested by the summoner, the person. It can really only be used by the person who creates the amulet. But if you have someone suffering from extreme possession, I mean, we're talking about someone damaging other people, someone carving their face up. If it's a low-level entity, they'll start self-carving their face or something, or something more sophisticated. But it's capable of being applied against something as ancient and powerful as a fire spirit, for instance, a desert jinn. Yes. They're not unknown to take over the human form. They're older. Most of them are older than the first Atlantean soul. They're timeless. They're powerful. They know what they're doing, and they really, really take some shifting. If other applications do not work, then the devil's flesh, in the rare occurrence that someone may encounter this problem, it's worth looking at, because again, you really are fighting fire with fire, and sometimes that's what you have to do. And in the case of Belial, Jinn, it will be a case of whose flame burns brightest. So you will achieve success with it.
That's pretty heavy. That's really pretty heavy. But I challenge you with the thought that I don't think everyone putting forth many of these rituals may be up to the part of giving it all it takes to getting out with it. I mean, it's not just about reciting. It's not just about putting it through. So can you help, I guess, those out there who would like to give more, let's say, give their rituals or their rites more purpose? Because I don't want people to feel that it's just about picking up the book and going through going through the words and going through the actual acts. What more could someone actually do to actually encourage, let's say, help the process going about? Because exorcism is pretty heavy, healing is pretty heavy, cursing is pretty heavy. So, I mean...
It depends on each of the select areas. If I approach them one at a time, if someone's going to perform an exorcism and they wish to fashion the devil's flesh, or they have fashioned it for that, they're not going to achieve success unless they are at a certain level. They have patronage with Belial, yes. They have connection to Hecate. You don't necessarily need to be a child of Belial to work with him within that. That is a rite that can be taken. An advanced magician, a prominent witchcraft practitioner, they will be able to achieve success with that.
I see.
There are no guarantees. There are no guarantees with any of this work. Not in failure, but in you're dealing with very powerful primal forces at your most exposed. But that's how you achieve great things. A beginner will not be able to fashion the devil's flesh. But then again, unless you're a complete idiot, a beginner is not going to look at the devil's flesh and think, okay, I'm going to now go straight to the back of this book and I'm going to do this and make contact with an entity I've never made. You build a relationship.
Definitely.
Someone who's an advanced magician, even someone coming over from one of the shamanic or possibly the ceremonial magic paths, provided they're not going to sigil, torture and chain rattle, because the gates will not be open to them. But if they apply their personal power and their personal experience to this, will be able to do that. It's akin to riding a motorcycle. If you've never ridden a motorcycle before, what sort of person would get on the latest Yamaha R1M at 200 brake horsepower? You have to build up to certain things. You have to have experience. Devotion is key if you are looking for assistance. In the realms of making the rite succeed, the onus is on the individual to make connection with the spirits and the gods. Therefore, nothing within any book, whether it's Primal Craft, whether it's Paul Hewson's book, it doesn't matter. You can't just pick up a book, recite something, stand here, say this, do that, and expect it to work.
Of course.
You are required to ignite and inflame your soul in passion, be it love, sexual passion, spiritual passion, all of your emotions, everything, especially if you're dealing with primal or primordial forces. It is a given that should be understood simply by looking at the magnitude and power of these rites. But I would hasten to add that does not mean that they are out of reach.
Of course.
They are not out of reach. They are being given to people now for people to use them, and particularly with the Witchblood Grail. Rites of the devil's flesh may be utilised by someone with sufficient experience who is not necessarily a devotee of the primal path. If they begin to struggle, devotion is going to help. Faith is going to help. But that is a rite of the creation of an amulet. You can take that, you could adapt that within. The ensowing of the fetish lord is put forward as part of the completion of the work of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire. However, you could create a fetish pole, a fetish lord, and you can ensoul it with Belial's power within an indoor temple, within a wood. It is a temple and a body of power within itself. You need to be flexible enough intellectually to adapt that right. But that comes down to being able to read the words in front of you and intuit where to adapt it. That can be done. as regarding someone getting in above their heads and not being able to find their way back, you need to apply a bit of common sense in what you're doing. If you're going to be one of these people that picks up the Scorpion God, looks at the back of the Scorpion, and you see, I pick on that book because that book, above all others, is sequential. You have to go through that in sequence. The Scorpion God itself is a walking soul trap. It will either make you, the level of power that a book like that gives you, or break you. And that's to do with the connection that is denoted by the connection to the primal Atlantean gods. You can't circumvent something like that. Excuse me. You can't circumvent something like that. You have to go through it sequentially. So picking the book up, looking at the architects of Sephirans, and blooding those seals and calling them forward. What you're calling will give you rites of child sacrifice. It will give you blood, fire and brimstone, because it's something that Sephiran sends forward to the sort of people that believe that they can walk past her ring past not soul hooks without proving the worth of their devotion and soul. And therefore what happens is that they basically get used as a shell, they get vaporized. Someone who approaches that book with devotion and diligence and goes from start to finish, having progressed perhaps through Queen of Hell and the Red King, or being advanced enough in other areas and respectful enough to go through, will be given the knowledge and power that will make them into something that they won't find anywhere else. The awakening of these primal facets, connecting the mind through primal gateways to the universe, to the primal entities that exist outside it, that will make you a magician that will elevate you beyond anything you could, possibly envisage. It will break you just as quickly, and you will walk around in the flesh in a deluded state if you try to circumvent something like that, and you will basically be vampirized. Your connection to the gods will be shut down. You will be seen as and used as an opportunity, a finger puppet. Things will not go well for you on the mundane or anywhere else. Relationships, everything will just come apart. But I mean, really, if you just take a look at a book like the Scorpion God, and I'm picking on that because that's sequential, this book not so much, then it's self-explanatory. If your ego drives you to go to the end of a book like that without reading it correctly, or you read it correctly and then you go to the end of a book like that because you think, well, these are the most powerful set of sigils, and you do that, seriously, I have to say, as awful as it sounds, I'm devoid of sympathy. There's a complete lack of respect, lack of faith and lack of devotion for the work. You're going to get what you're asking for. You go through that sequentially with devotion, perfect. This book, you could pick this book up. This is probably, as a whole, the most powerful of the Primal Craft books, but it's also the most flexible. This is the book that I've now been allowed to bring forward. This is the book I wanted to bring forward, and Hecate has helped me because there is a level of devotion. I have had to restore the primal current, and it has been my honour, and it remains until this body is dead, the honour in this incarnation, the greatest honour, to have been the one she's reawoken and activated and chosen for this. But things have to be done in sequence and correctly initially. So the primal current, the introduction, its explanation, its first open gateway, Queen of Hell, had to be brought forth. Empowerments for people that wished to, work beyond the level of the flesh or within the level of the flesh or at certain levels of the soul, Clipothic, Atlantean, Stellar, beyond the stellar gateways, people who want to ride the steeds of the gods and work cosmically as opposed to earthy and in blood, or all of these things, that this is all possible. This has to be put forward in an overview with gateways through which people can go and learn and empower them. That's the Trident Trilogy. The formation of actual gateways upon this earth through which people can transcend at the level of the soul, reforming draconian entities, reforming the body of the dragon and contributing themselves in blood and in sacrifice to the reformation of the great dragon itself, the great beast whose body this planet encompasses, the Lord Belial, the Behemoth. to be able to contribute to that, to form these temples, and to travel to the thrones of the gods, to the Atlantean realms, the hells, the seven hells of Rannoch, the heavens, beyond that to the stellar heights, to possibly even be graced by the presence of Lucifer at his own throne, through the nine gates of the gods. That's the way of sacrifice. That's what these books have been brought forward. So initially I had to put forward, I've had to reform, restructure and return the primal current. What I have wanted to do also, I'm very, very devoted. My faith, my devotion to Hecate is my existence, not just my life. And I think everyone kind of who knows anything about me understands that. But I also want to give people within the witchcraft, I want to return knowledge that has been wiped out, burned, diluted, and just twisted. In a lot of cases, I normally remain very polite in interviews, but I have to say, by idiots that want to oversimplify things because they want to sell something that is a simplification of something that cannot necessarily be simplified. Certain formulas, certain paths, certain powers. The rites in here aren't particularly complicated, but they are consummate. They are full. They're not circumvented. When you work the ritual of the incubus and you form that solid body, this is far denser than any astral shade or body of flame or body of darkness. You know, you're talking about something that's almost earthy in its flame and its blood, a genuine incubus form. The sort of stuff that people know or perceive may have been possible from medieval grimoires, they don't have that anymore. This is the stuff I've had this for several years. I've practiced this stuff, I've worked this stuff. I wanted to be able to bring it back, but I can't just throw it out there. It has to be put forth in context. Therefore, I've had to reintroduce the primal craft. People now have an understanding of primal craft, the primal current, the primal Atlantean current, the draconian current, and how it's interwoven with the Atlantean current, and the current and the colours of Trident Witchflame. And the books are there, the gateways are there, they're all consecrated as the bodies and flesh of the gods. Now I can continue that. This book is the continuance of the full formula of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire. It gives not only the completion of the formula of the Temple Dragon, the formula of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire, it explains the Book of Hecate. I know you want to ask me about that in a bit, but we'll come back to that. The Book of Souls, the Path of Initiation, complete. For those who wish to follow this path, either as solitaries or as a covenant or a temple, it explains the significance and gives prophecies of the path of the evolution of man, because we're all intrinsically woven, and the fate of the actual living planet itself is very important to us. We don't live in a fantasy bubble in the Witchflame, certainly not within the primal current. It gives all of that, but within that I have also been able, by the grace of Hecate, to bring forth certain rites, certain rituals that, although they will be small books, could have been released as smaller books. Why? When I can put them all together and give people something that's consummate, that covers everything. It finishes the formation of these temples and ultimately leads the soul who's working through these temples through the gates of the Devil's Throne to the throne of Belial at the heart of this earth. It gives those who wish to come from the outside the ability to take rites and with sufficient experience, which is that for them to decide and adapt them to their own path, and then learn, be empowered, and even enjoy these rituals.
I have a question that I have to ask you that I don't believe I have ever asked you, but in reference to lots of the gnosis and the gifts that one does get from dedication, and especially when you're talking about healing, and if one was successful and going through an exorcism, in your own experience or through the gnosis that you've received, what is the quote-unquote payment of such a thing, of bringing someone back from a coma, if someone was successful in doing that, such as someone that you've helped? Surely there is it's not just a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am type of thing. It's not one of those things where you just walk away. Is there sort of something that people should know about going forth in this? Because it's not something that you can casually just go about and then say, I was successful. And that's really dear to my heart, to say that dedication goes beyond the point of asking. It's a point of dedication there beyond that point.
When it comes to the realms of having been able to help people, I mean, the two instances where people, both individuals, were in a coma, that's the only twice I've ever been involved in that. There could be a third where I don't succeed. I'm not putting myself out there because I don't want to be inundated with people that have all of these family members in hospital, all of these problems. What I'm trying to do is show people that there are possibilities to do this. It comes back to, if I digress slightly, it comes back to the countering malefica. That's easier. When someone's being attacked, I can just move that aside. It causes stress because I kind of take on the attack myself, and it causes me problems, and then it's moved aside and it's done. But if you do that for someone, this is the best way to explain this. If you do that for someone, then you've done that in that instance. That problem from the same person, from the same sender in realms of malefica, can reoccur. If you teach someone how to stop that, how to cleanse themselves, how to tie this person up, how to put an end to them, if it's going to be that way, then it's going to be that way, then they carry that experience and they become stronger, they evolve. It's every time someone successfully comes through a malefic attack, that is actually a period of strengthening. It's a period of, in a form of evolution. If you teach people how to do that for themselves, then they will always be able to do that. So regarding healing and everything else, what I'm trying to do with these rites is give people this knowledge so they can go away and do it. The fact of the matter is, the one instance is going to make me sound awfully selfish. The one instance that I was directly involved, it was personal to me. So yes, obviously I'm involved. The other instance, it was a devotee, and he did it with Hecate. He probably doesn't know that I went straight away that evening and did a ritual, but at the end of the day, he was the guy waking up in a circle formed of blood, with blood on the floor, exhausted. Every morning for 4 or 5 days until his sister came out of a coma. So he deserves the kudos for that. Ultimately, it rests with Hecate. The reward in being able to put this knowledge forward is in being able to give people the sort of power and knowledge that somewhere in their hearts and their souls they know existed, but hasn't been around for a long time. To be able to return that, to be able to return Hecate's primal current is reward in itself for me. When it comes to actually, on the few times when I have been able to make a personal difference to people in their lives, I think that speaks for itself. If you're able to help someone, that is reward in itself. Do you get energy back? Do you get an evolution? It depends on the individual instance, but anyone, well, even the people giving out herbal remedies and things like that, who are able to heal people, they get a reward. Even when people have bought a pack of herbs off someone that's going to take away a rash, so, these days there's people in certain parts of Europe that do that. There's a lot of them up in Glastonbury, places like that. Okay, the village wise woman, the financial exchange or the exchange of food, that's energy, that's an exchange. There's rewards on both sides there. For anyone with any kind of balanced heart, I would say that if they've been able to help someone, then that in itself is a reward. What is important with the heavier aspects of the work, when it comes to health, when it comes to people, whether it's coma, whether it's severe illness, severe malefica, anything like that, if you've got it from me, if you've taken it from the books, if you've got it anyway, if you've had it direct, the biggest thing and the most important thing to remember is to reward with respect and honour by making known and in that way showing your devotion to the god or the goddess who has assisted you with that, who has given you the power. I might have given you the ritual, but in many cases I can pretty much assure you it will be Hecate or one of the members of the trident that's given you the power. I never gave you the power. That came from them. So in your personal work, and I'm not a big fan of the public domain or the digital. I'm pretty much a dinosaur, as everyone knows, and laughs at me about it. But I do use the internet. I do have a website. I think sometimes you need to make it public in some form of public letter to write that, you know, I almost had this family tragedy, and by the grace of Hecate, this was done. You don't have to give specific ritual. If you're imparting blood and sexual fluids at film, people find that very, very private. You don't have to get into detail about that. But to let someone know that you went to the goddess, whether that was via ritual from myself, the books, another practitioner, that you went to Lucifer or Belial, that you did that it succeeded because they assisted you, because their hand turned fate in your favour, in ritual, in devotion, for blood spilled, for a lifetime of devotion and service offered. It's not a lot to put down for a loved one. Is eternal soul devotion a lot to put down if you dearly love somebody that much and they're on their way out and you don't want that? That's a decision you have to make. But you should always laud and respect the individual entity, god or goddess, who helped you with that, lest you affront them and the tables be returned in the other direction. Not out of fear, you should do it anyways out of respect, but there is always the possibility. Gods don't like being disrespected. They don't like lack of devotion. So if you say you're going to do, then you should do.
I would say so. That's very important. I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want it to be just to take I do believe that many people go about knowledge too often and asking but not giving back. And I think that's a really important part because it strengthens the relationship. It gives thanks back to the gods and to the goddesses. So I thank you for that because
there are a lot of self-centered egomaniacs out there. Confidence and even borderline arrogance, depending on how that confidence in one's ability is put across, is one thing. Egomania and egocentric behaviour is something entirely different, and the two are sometimes confused. Egomaniacs tend to be incredibly selfish, and a lot of them have become deluded in the occult fraternity into thinking that one of the biggest pitfalls for neophytes don't fall for this. Adepts fall down this. You'll see not a lot, but you'll see some really advanced practitioners and magicians follow their devotion all the way through, and then they hit a point where that completely drops off, and you can almost see it in them. They've started thinking in their own minds that all of this power, all of this knowledge, all that, they did that. That came from them. They forget who gave them the power. That's the initiation of one of the forms of the fall, the individual fall. But you can see it.
Well, I've seen a lot of dedication through the Primal Craft, through Devotees that have put great things out, like the Temple of Belial, as well as the Garden of the Gods. So I really want to say that I can see the dedication and the gratitude and wanting to build that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I just think
I can elaborate a little bit. The gatekeeper of both gatekeepers are actually they're not shy people. They're very confident people, but they're doing this in pure devotion. I think for both individuals, if they could avoid the general public and the public domain, which in undertaking these huge tasks they can't, but if they could, they would. You know, that their relationship is with the trident, it's with the gods, but they are willing to go far above and beyond the call of even, intense devotion. far above and beyond the call of duty and intense devotion and faith, to give something back. I mean, the gatekeeper of the Temple of Belial, he's quite experienced, but he's been working within the Primal Craft, and he came with his own experience from another, let's call it a witchcraft area, and he's been working for 5 years within the Primal Craft, and he's been very, very, he's quite harshly tested. I watched him undergo, Belial put him through the mill a few times, Hecate's, that they wanted to make sure they were making the right choice, and there were times when I just thought, this guy's not going to stay, and I was wrong. I didn't underestimate him, I just thought, wow, they were really making things difficult for him. They really wanted to see if he would crawl over hot coals. But what he's been given in return is borderline, and it's approaching in the terms of knowledge. And the guy's still working intensely all the time. He's now working in the catacombs of Belial. He's an initiate of the Mother Temple of Four Pillars of Fire. He is empowered as, he's actually the first individual to successfully open a pillar of fire in devotion, correctly, with sacrifice for the gods, not to try and circumvent it. So he's the only one who's successfully opened one of the four pillars of fire. But he's that sort of person. He's very, very devoted like that, and he's been put through the mill, and now he's starting to get the knowledge that, it's really rich. It's everything that he's always, kind of wanted in that way. The knowledge is there. Certain powers there. It's like looking through the glass window at a certain stage in your evolution. You've got so much, and there's this stuff, and it's like, is that really the stuff of legend, or does it actually exist? Through his initiation at the Mother Temple and through his intense devotion in the Temple of Belial, the guy he has a bone key. He's able to access the catacombs of Belial circa the Devil's Throne. It's very, very difficult. He's glimpsed it, and I don't want to give too much of his private information away. He's got close, he's seen it, he's been there, but it's a case of having to work. But that's very sanity stretching. The energy, it's overloading, and it overloads the soul and the mind, and you have to take a step back and a break sometimes and assimilate the energy and the power. That's evolution. The guy is a devotee of Belial. Belial basically claimed this guy a long time ago. What was interesting about the gatekeeper of the Temple of Belial is that he sent me, after an intense testing process at both the hands of Hecate and Belial, and Sephiroth sort of showed up in his life, and a lot of people find her extremely intimidating, and rightly so. But when you work with her, if she takes to you as a devotee, you really have a fantastic being supporting you, standing behind you, on your side. Keep it in basic terminology. She will give you all of the power and knowledge that you never knew existed, provided Hecate agrees. They all work together, the four pillars of the trident. But the devotee, the gatekeeper of the Temple of Belial, came to me and he said, look, I've been given this formula to not only construct, but to open this gateway. You construct it on the physical plane and you open it correctly with the formula, it forms this temple on the inner planes that no matter then what happens, it will forever stand. That's why the formula in opening these gateways is so important. And he was given it, and it was very akin to the formation of the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire in the altar of sacrifice. But it wasn't the same. You could see similarities, but it wasn't the same. However, what was interesting was that he was given that before I'd even shown my own partner the formula for the altar of sacrifice. No one had seen it. And reading through the emails and reading the formula he's been given and seeing the richness, you just feel the power coming off it, okay? You can tell that's come straight, that's been given, bestowed directly by Belial's hand to this individual. And Belial was very specific in doing that to show me this is the right man for this temple. This is the right person because he's been given the formula long before I published the altar of sacrifice. And the guy was very, very interested in undertaking not only the initiation, but also undertaking the work. He wanted to know, if anyone was opening the pillar of fire of Belial, and the gods weren't the only ones that made it difficult. When you watch this, I apologise. I made it very difficult for him. I wanted to make sure even as small as I am from the human aspect, I wanted to make sure that we had the right person, and that's why the gods were sending me these messages, and I still waited. I dragged my feet and I made him wait, but I've seen the devotion he's put forward, I've seen the work that he's done, and Belial chose wisely when he chose the gatekeeper for his temple. I didn't choose this guy, Belial chose him. I was just instrumental in dragging things out a little bit on the initiation, and you know, I think anyone that knows me really well knows I can be very awkward, and certainly the gatekeeper of the temple of Belial has told me I can be very awkward. It's the truth. But I wanted to be sure, and Belial chose very wisely with this guy. The temple exists in southern France. I don't want to get any more specific than that. The gatekeeper, he manages and is the keeper of that gate, and that pillar of fire that is one of the 4 pillars of fire that will be opened and is connected and conjoined to the mother temple. But he's the gatekeeper of that temple, therefore it's his decision what is revealed and what's not. He manages that, he controls that. That's been given to him by Belial. He's intrinsically connected, as is his temple, that's part of the certainly the formula under the world formula of the Temple of 4 Pillars of Fire. But that's up to the gatekeeper to divulge any further. It's in the south of France. He's very specific. He has a small online presence. He didn't want it. The dinosaur, I told him he needed that so that people at least knew that the temple existed. His path, his temple and his gateway is different to that of the gatekeeper of the garden of the fountain of the gods. Therefore the gatekeeper of Belial's temple was very specific. No photographs. You'll notice that I don't have photographs of the mother temple. The people that have been there, they can see it, it's not a problem. I don't allow photographs taken. The artistic depiction in the altar of sacrifice is almost stone for stone exact. But there's a reason why people sometimes don't want photographs. The gatekeeper of Belial's temple is very specific. He said, I don't want photographs. He has them. I've seen them, but they're not for sharing in the public domain. Not everything ritual, not all ritual altars, not, you know, I don't put my altars, I don't put anything like that in the public domain. I personally don't believe in it. But to each their own. So I said, look, you need a small indication that you're there, that you exist. Because he does want only a couple, he wants to work with some quality people, and he's getting that now. But he has material, he's actually quite a good teacher. There was a gentleman been coming to me for a couple of years, working in the Primal Craft. He's got a lot of promise. I don't always have time to teach the in-between things. So this gentleman went to the temple of Belial's gatekeeper, and he said, I'm having a little bit of difficulty in this area and in this area, and he was given some exercises, and then the next thing I get this email telling me how great the temple of Belial's gatekeeper is, and this is all opened up to this other guy. And so there is knowledge being passed on from there now, but the small online presence is very select, and the access to the training packages are passworded. The gatekeeper is very specific. Again, he's similar to myself. Quality, not quantity. It's not about numbers, it's about devotion.
Well, with that, I want to say I recall you mentioning the Witchblood Grail when we did the altar sacrifice interview. And I thought at that point, in reading the altar of sacrifice, that there was a lot of information covered. There's a lot of notes that you put into the book. And after reading the Witchblood Grail, I was really amazed about the intensity and the depths of all the rites in this book. What really confuses me, or I would say almost to the point of intimidation, is that there's so much in here. And I know that you're working on the next book. Mark, really, seriously, how can someone keep up with this? Because you're talking about, I was putting myself through. Okay, fine. If I wanted to go through,
you don't need to.
Okay,
you
good.
don't need to. I've been asked this before. I was asked this. I performed. I opened the gateways for initiation. I don't actually perform the initiation. Hecate does, but I opened the gateways for initiation. So I performed an initiation at the temple earlier this week, and the person who came asked me, you're working at a geometric rate. How is anyone supposed to catch up with you? I said, look, it's not a race. It's not a competition. What you need to understand is what I always say is some people work all the way through.
Yes.
Or are trying, or they are adamant they are going to work all the way through. Okay? I've got people that opened Queen of Hell, and they've worked Queen of Hell. They've done some of them have, and some of them have not achieved the first crown of divinity. But there have been other gateways opened up within that book. They've had other, through their exploration of that particular gate, the Queen of Hell book, they've had connection with the Hecate, they've been given gnosis, they've been pulled in a tangential direction on a parallel path. They're doing other work. I don't have so much contact now, but one lady was given the universal formula, the restoration, and this is like a lifetime thing, of the tower with the tarot, the universal gateways,
Yes.
everything that's lost with the actual tarot, recreating that pillar, that pylon of power that flows through the whole universe. There's nothing written about the tarot and Queen of Hell, but that comes from that. So there are people coming off doing that. So it's not necessarily a question of I have to go through every book, but some people want to. But it's an evolution, and it's not a competition or a race. And if you're going to race it, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Of course.
But at the same time, it falls upon me to bring forth all of these different strands in the Primal Craft. So I work through them. I've been doing this a long time. I've got a backlog now of, I think I said 10 years. We're looking at 15 years of books that have got to come out. To preempt the question of, well, do I have to wait 15 years for for this volume? What volume? You don't know what you're waiting for. So no, you don't have to wait for anything. It's a question of bringing through what's relevant at this time. And what's relevant at this time is through. I'm bringing through as much as I can. I work as much as I can, but very few people will work all through the Trident Trilogy and all through the books of sacrifice, but they want to have the knowledge, they want to have the power. Some people will work through it, but it's not a competition. And within the books, you don't know what gateways within these volumes are going to open. You don't know what experience until you perform the rituals. Because one of my most frequent, not biggest, replies during Queen of Hell was, well, what happens when people ask, what happens when you do this, what happens when you do that? Perform the rite, find out. What you need to know is written in the books. Beyond that, you either don't need to know it, or I'm not going to tell you it, because that's armchair magician stuff. You want to get into it, you need to perform the rite. When people perform the rites and they go into it, all this other knowledge comes. What the books do is they provide further gateways, but this way, there are many paths within the Primal Craft, but also in doing that, they provide incentive. Also, with some of these books, you see, with the way of sacrifice, you've got sacrificial arts in there, but you've got the opening of the temple. I mean, in this book alone, you may never perform the rites in this book, but if you're curious to know the destiny of man's evolution through the books of evolution and the books of creation, which are the books of the flesh of Hecate, the books of the four pillars of flame, in which initiates write their blood, in their blood, they write their names on the body of Hecate. When those books are full, next phases of evolution are triggered. If you're interested in the apocalyptic prophecies of what will happen if this world soul, when this world soul is not brought in, when the world soul is weighed in just under 3.5 centuries' time, they begin the Scorpion, or they begin the Red King, but really more in depth in the Scorpion, but in the altar of sacrifice, in the Witchblood Grail, at the very beginning, the first several pages, in the prayers, in the explanations, in the call of the children of Witchflame, there is a charge, a call to arms. The call of the children of Witchflame is the call to arms for the children of the trident path, to take up the dagger and the parchment, to take back your freedom in a world controlled, a world of cameras, a world of pharmaceutical companies and governments and tyranny, both electronic and actual shackle. A world of walls and guns. You can't go up against that with brute force. You won't be here tomorrow. But you can act from within the shadows. You can attain freedom, even if it's only still maintaining and reawakening others through maintaining freedom of thought. Because freedom of thought precedes freedom of action and freedom of life. Because it's being taken away from us. The charge of the children of Witchflame is in there. The prophecies of the apocalypse are in there. This particular book itself is opened and fashioned as a gateway to the devil's throne. The book is consecrated as the body and flesh of the gods. It's consecrated as the gateway to its patrons. But it's forged as a gate to the devil's throne. But you need to open it. You need to go through the rituals. There's a ritual in the end of this book that allows you to call forth the book's familiar. There's a seal blind pressed into the end of the book in ritual through which you must call forth through the power of Hecate, Lucifer, Belial and Zephyrans, the book's familiar, by spilling your blood into the blind pressed seal at the end of this book, pressing the pages together and using your own blood in call, in devotion, with your soul in flame, in possession. You open the book as a talisman to an even greater level of power. It becomes even more talismanic and so intrinsically linked to you because it's your witch blood that you're pouring into a seal forged. It's pressed into the book. The familiar granted unto you through the completion of that rite by Belial will lead you through elements of his catacombs. You will not have full access to the devil's throne, but the familiar will bring forth knowledge and power and rights that are not in that book from a reservoir held at the throne of the Crown Prince at the heart of this earth. It's a reservoir, it's a realm, it's a gate of power. It is, for want of a better expression, loosely, it manifests as a tome to the eye, to the soul eye, and it's Belial's lost and sacred rights and power. So it is known as the Book of the Devil's Witchcraft. However, it is actually a reservoir of power. The familiar will bring aspects. People who come to the temple and are invited for full initiation and who transcend to the level of the devil's throne and who pursue and follow that work, such as the gatekeeper of the temple of Belial, the book, this reservoir of power, is presented by Hecate herself at the throne of Belial. It is by her will and her will alone that this is opened for you. I say open for you, it opens and you transcend into this realm. They will read from the Book of the Devil's Witchcraft. They will have unbridled access to it, unlimited access to its power. They will transcend it. But this tome alone, performing the rite in the end, calling forth the familiar acts as the go-between. It's your fetch. It will bring all of these rites, all of this knowledge in communion. It activates the book as a talismanic key through which it interacts with its siblings, the Altar of Sacrifice and the third book, and they form a gateway through a process that I'm not going to go into now. It's in the third book that actually does open a larger gate to the Devil's Throne. For people that are unable to make it to the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire, there is the possibility of accessing the throne of Belial direct. I don't mean in evocation, I mean in transcendence down there. So to that end, it probably sounds very advanced, but when you're asking me, like, how do people keep up with this? What you need to understand about the books of the way of sacrifice is that you could be working Queen of Hell. The beauty of the Altar of Sacrifice, despite its depth and its power, and there's a lot of blood in it, and the Witchblood Grail, you can work those concurrent. You see, the Trident Trilogy are the first gateways upon the path. They're the introduction, even if you didn't work them. I know some people that have perhaps not worked so much Queen of Hell and gone straight to the Altar of Sacrifice because of their level of experience in other areas, and they've crossed over to this path, they've given their devotion over to Hecate. The other books give you the understanding of the path. But we're now at a point where you can begin to work things concurrently.
Right.
This is why I wanted to bring forth more of the individual rites, so that people now, I was bound by Hecate to bring forth the Trident Trilogy, and they are the first gates upon the path. And the evolution within all three of those books, it's limitless. It really is. It's right to Hecate's throne. How far do you want to go through those books? Because once you're in them, once you're working in the Scorpion God, even the Rite of the Phoenix is in the first book. That initiates if you are at a sufficient level of power and are able, and there are no guarantees to do it, that initiates the crossing of the abyss. How far do you want to go? Because Hecate will give you, when you are ready, if you are devoted enough, all of the power. If you are devoted enough for the right reasons and you're balanced, that you never knew existed. How far do you want to go? That's what those books are there for. Now, and I was bound to bring those forward. She wanted me to bring, that's the introduction, the return of the primal current, and opening those gateways lets it flow back here. Opening the Temple of Four Pillars of Fire. It's now 5 years since I opened that with the correct formula. Allows the current to flow back into the collective unconscious, it allows it to flow back into the world. But at the same time, certain gates remain closed and are temporary and have to be released at the correct time. But this is the work that I wanted to bring forward. I have more freedom in what I'm bringing through now through my arrangements with Hecate, so I'm now able to give people work within the Primal Craft volumes that they go, okay, well, I'm not going to lay stones by hand and form this temple. This is not to say you can circumvent the path, you cannot, but there are rites that you can take out of this book and practice just that rite. Like you could, the best example is say the Toad Rite. There's a Toad Rite in the Primal Craft. It's very different to the Toad Rite. It's actually more constrained. You have to be more careful with the Hecate's Toad Rite. It gives a lot of power, but you don't just want to walk into it and sacrifice the toad, because that will end very, very badly. It's invitation to the path of sacrifice within that. But say the Toad Rite that Andrew Chumley put forward, okay, his grimoire of the Golden Toad. People come from different paths, they pick that book up, some of them will work it, because they're able to do that. And that's the beauty of something like that. There are other rites from other practitioners, devoted practitioners and authors, some here with us, some no longer with us, that people can do that with. I'm now at a stage where I'm able to put a sufficient amount of those rituals in the books that people can take the incubus rite, the devil's flesh rite. There are people that have never worked Queen of Hell that are now, they're working with Sephiroth because she's introduced herself to them. But there are also out there people who have, again, it's the so-called advanced practitioners that suffer from this, not the beginners walking the path. They tend to have more respect. There are some so-called advanced practitioners that I've watched completely lose their connection to the gods. Their talent, their energy, it's all been drained away because they have tried to not just shortcut certain paths, they have tried to sell the god short on the devotion in certain areas that they should have had. It's pretty apparent to the eye what you could adapt, say, out of this and what you couldn't. But at the end of the day, you know, if you have this book, if you're really drawn to one of the rites, and you're not actually initiated, or you're not self-initiated, and I don't necessarily mean the temple. Queen of Hell allows you to self-initiate to Hecate. She'll initiate you. If she wants you, she hears your call, and if you call correctly, she will hear it. Then, if you're not initiated to Hecate, you are drawn to her, or you're drawn to Lucifer, or Belial, or Sephiroth, drawn to the energy, but you're respectful enough to be, or you're unsure, and you're smart enough to think, well, I'm not sure if I can just adapt this and in what way. I'm not hard to find, and I will help if I can.
Well, with that, I'd like to ask you, how far are you going to take us next?
How far do you want to go?
I got called out. Well,
I believe I should say now, I think I'd like to challenge you here, Mona.
all
What's your
right.
favourite line? How far would you like to go? The next book will be far more powerful than probably the sum of all of its previous ones. That is not to say that it is so advanced that it is out of reach. Absolutely not the case. But above all, the next book contains a continuation of the ethos of the Primal Craft work and the Temple work. But it's going to be a large book, and it's going to contain more independent rites than any of the other, probably than the sum of the others. More independently adaptable rites you can perform within the Primal Craft, but you may be able to adapt, for people from another witchcraft path. I put it to you that the people perform these rites will be so enamoured with what they receive that they will probably come over to Hecate. It's nothing to do with me, I'm just a messenger. But they will see truly, that the blinkers will be taken off, the shackles will be taken off, the barriers and the obstructions and the obstacles will be removed, the ones that they didn't even know were there. Even the advanced people on their paths, and what they feel, what they get, will make them want to pursue it further. But if they don't, there are no snares within that book per se in that way. But it's going to yield more power than the sum of its predecessors. It's going to be a large book. It's actually 2/3 written already. By the time you release this video, it will be written, because it's a process of extracting, the note extraction process. I began that at the start of this year, and it would have been finished now, Mona, except that, as you know, I've been very busy with my own personal path. I've been very busy with the Witchblood Grail, and this is my busiest year yet. It's actually quite non-stop. Anno Diaboli has been a very busy year. Why Anno Diaboli? Well, when you explore the rites within the books, Belial will explain that to you. Or actually perhaps more so Lucifer. But it has been a very, very busy year, and so that the book itself isn't complete. And then even when I finished writing it, there's a lot more to go in. It's a long process. The books are all hand bound, and as you can see, there is no expense spared. That's because they are published once, and they are my devoted offerings. I want the books, I want their binding to match their content, and that's my devotional offering put forth for the gods. That's why we have this, and I'll confess, this creeping excellence of each book being better. I'm trying.
I like to see. I have to say, I'm not going to use the word can't, because I know you always surpass the book. The book past. You're always doing better. You're always raising the bar. So I can only imagine what you're going to put out for the next one.
I'm trying. On the next one, it's. I was very, very happy with this book.
Yeah, and you should be. And you should be. Well, Mark, it's been a lot that you've given, because there's a lot in this book. There's a lot of advice. It gives to every aspect of life, spirituality, and the realms beyond. A lot of dedication in this book that one can actually, put in and get out. A lot that people can give to other people as well. So it's not something where it's a selfish book that you can just take in and hold the power. You can actually give back to people. So that's a very good thing. And you cannot say that much for all the books. But I want to thank you so much for, as usual, you go beyond the call of duty when asking, doing, your dedication, and your willingness to help everyone out there. And I have to say that, I can see, and I've been a witness to the praise and the testament that many people have said that you've taught them. So I just want to thank you on my behalf that, you've been just an asset just to really just want to do. It's been a privilege to know you and to work with you all this time.
Igualmente, thank you. it's an honour to be able to bring this work forward. So it kind of brings us back to that question before. The reward is in bringing back the work itself. I do hit points where I am exhausted.
Of course.
You know, and then I have to step back a little bit. But I don't really rest. I don't really rest for very long before. There's always so much. It's a constant flow, and it's a huge current and a huge. I can't say subject because it's an evolution. It's not even a way of life. I mean, it is for me, but it's an evolution that transcends for me all incarnations, all lifetimes. So this trying to return this primal element of it that Hecate wants to return now, it is consuming, but in the most honourable way. It is an honour to be able to bring it forward. So you're very welcome.
Yes, indeed. Well, as usual, but I think I've set a tone, a subtone of closing our interviews with you and Primal Craft and all the books. In the name of Hecate, amongst other gods that you've worked with and goddesses that you've worked with, who would you like to dedicate this interview to?
I must always give my first dedication and devotion to Hecate, to Lucifer, to Belial, and to Sephiroth. So, to the trident of Witchflame. However, this interview I would actually like to dedicate to you, the devotees out there, the people, the genuine devoted, the truly faithful who are following this path, who are discovering this path, who hear the call of Hecate, who hear the call of Sephiroth and Belial, who follow the flame of Lucifer. To the people who follow this path in true devotion and who are helping propagate this knowledge and to pass on the power of the primal craft, who are helping to infuse and return the current itself, and who are just in their own devotion following it in evolution. This interview and this book is dedicated to you.
Thank you.